what I should do now is move on to the kick drum. Kick drums are pretty straightforward, really. You don't really need to go to the level of fine tuning that you would on snare and toms. If you use a thick enough head on there, it'll tend to sound pretty decent anyway. I have a fair bit of damping inside. You know, inside the drum, I've got, you know, a sort of small pillow and some towels and a sort of weight on there just to weigh down the damping to keep it against the back head. So and I've got a double ply head on there. So it just seems to, for recording, it just seems to work better having that sort of bit extra damping. And again, in a dry room situation like this, it just sounds good to have that extra damping in there. As far as the tuning on the head goes, I tend to have it as slack as possible. So pretty much these lugs are pretty much falling off without rattling. So what I do is take it right down to the point where it just holds the rim onto the drum. So it's pretty slack. Again, it's down to personal preference. So you get a nice thud, you get a low sort of thud from it, and that tends to work better for recording. I'll look at some more open tunings when we move into the live room later, but that gives us, that combination of sort of low kick drum and snare in this drier recording environment. It's a bit sort of better. So we've got quite a nice balance between the kick and the snare. There is a debate with bass drums. There is a debate with bass drums about front head, whether to have the front head on or taken off. On this front head on with a hole cut in it that's big enough to put a mic in. I like to have a little bit of front head on there because if you're using sub kick mics on the front, which we'll look at later, I just find it gives you a little bit more resonance. You just get a slightly more tone out of the sub kick mics, and by having enough surface area on the front of the drum. You could easily, if you want a really dead kind of 70s thing, take the front head off, stuff more damping in, and just that'll make the drum a lot deader. I mean, back in the 70s and early 80s, we used to use a lot of concert toms, which is basically toms with no bottom heads on, and the sound is naturally deader because there's no resonating head. And it's the same with a kick drum, really. If there's no front head on, there's nothing else to resonate. I like that bit of extra resonance on there, but again, it's down to personal taste. The beauty of drums, there aren't any rights and wrongs. It's kind of a bit like music, really. It's down to personal preference, and but what I'm trying to show here is just a good basic starting point, especially with drum tuning. And as we start looking to more microphones later, at least it gives us, gives you a whole range of options of what you can do. But you need to start off with that really good grounding between the kick, snare, and the hi-hats. I mean, I won't talk too much about cymbals because they're a really personal choice. I tend to use these K-Dark cymbals because they record really well and they're not stupidly loud, which means I'm not getting a lot of spill between the cymbals and the drum mics. But and they just sound, they just sound a little bit darker, and they sit in the track really nicely. So it's just from trying millions of cymbals out over the years, and these are the ones that are just, again, my personal preference. But you get this, the interaction between the kick, snare, and the hi-hats is really important. And once you get that point right, then and that sounds good within the room. It's always a great place to start. And the first thing I do when I start recording a band is I'll just stand in the room with the drummer, listen to him or her play, and just see how that basic interaction between these three works. Because if they can balance up those three, then you know that you've got a good starting point. One of the things about multiple mic setups is sometimes musicians forget that the best way to balance up a drum kit is in the way you play it. It's so easy to sort of play the hi-hat way too loud. It's sort of, and if you want a good solid center point in the kit, it's just to have the plenty of kick and snare, and just, you know, you've got to balance things up yourself. But, you know, we'll look at all this later.